Hi everyone, I'm Mary Beth McAndrews from Dread Central. I'm here today with Caryn Coleman, the founder of The Future of Film is Female, and also the host and founder of the discussion series, The Future of Horror is Female. I'm super excited to chat with you today.
I'm excited to chat with you too. I would say be here, but I guess here is relative.
So first off, can you tell our audience a little bit about what The Future of Film is Female is?
Sure. So we're a nonprofit organization, and kind of our log line is we amplify the work of all women and non-binary filmmakers through three things, which are our short film fund that we award 3 times a year for pre-production and post-production short films. Our commitment to exhibition, which I'm a film programmer, so exhibition's really embedded into everything I do. And then community building programs, which is really within our funded filmmakers. But as we start opening back up, community is in person again. So
Cool. And then what about the discussion series, The Future of Horror is Female? Where does that fit into everything?
oh gosh, well, I love horror, and it's also embedded in my work as a film programmer. And so the first one we did was in relation to Meredith Alloway's short film, Bite Me. I feel like I'm totally messing that up, and so I apologize to her if I am. And we kind of, both of us, organized this group of women to talk about their work, and it wasn't just directors, it was also writers and critics and film programmers to kind of talk about their work in genre films. And it was so much fun. Like, it was really just like a delight to talk to these people and to listen to what they have to say. It was just fun, it was good people. And then a few months later, we did one for Nightstream. And then we started doing ones that were also very filmmaker focused. So the first one we did in that was around censor. So we had like Prano Bailey Bond and Caryn Kusama and Jennifer Reeder just generally talk about their work. And as they go along, I just kind of do them as films come out or topics come out that are sort of the moment. So we have one coming out that's on religion and horror in relation to Agnes. So yeah, it's like this wonderful little beast that has a life all of its own, but supporting horror. I mean, I've been in love with horror films since I was 11, so it's just part and parcel of my work.
That's incredible. So tell me more about your horror history, Lisa, since you were 11. So what was your first horror movie? Like, how did you kind of get into the genre?
Okay, so my first horror movie was Halloween 5 in a movie theater.
Oh my God, are you serious? That is incredible. Halloween 5 in a movie theater.
In a movie theater.
Wow.
I was just telling someone this. It's the one where Michael Myers like takes off his mask.
Yeah.
And you see his face. And I was like, oh, he's kind of good looking. And I'm like, I said that on a panel a little while ago, and I was like, that makes so much sense in my life. Like this
everything clicks together.
Attraction to murderous men. And then I liked it. I watched things. And then when I was in my 20s, I lived in Chicago, and there was this kind of video store / toy shop, and it was called House of Monsters. And I would go there like every Saturday, and they'd be like, here's this movie, you should check out this movie, you should check out this movie. And it just sent me down this forever rabbit hole of finding these like weird gems of films. So it's like, here's Spider Baby, here's Devil's Nightmare, all this like stuff cool. I would just find out. And then just going to the, it's like records. Like, I'd go to the video store and be like, this cover looks cool, let's watch that. And then when I was in grad school, I was like, oh, I can't really escape horror films. And so my research project for grad school was on the relationship between horror films and contemporary art, because there's a lot of contemporary artists influenced by horror films. And so that was kind of like, because it was a curatorial program, so the idea was to be in like the visual arts, but I couldn't not, it was like there, and so that was when it really became like my work. It wasn't just something I watched, but it was something that became like integral to the things that I'm doing. And then when I started film programming, my first program in the theater was Bob Clark's Death Dream on 35 millimeter. And so I just kind of, it's like, that's that's it, so it's like the work that I do now, which has evolved. I don't do a lot of like rep programming anymore. It's usually working with new independent films. There's such a like lively independent horror film release happening in the world that it's terribly exciting.
Yeah, I also did my grad school work on horror. I did it on
No.
Revenge, and the female directed rape revenge film, which that's like a big part of my research, which is why I have
Yes.
my pink earrings that I inspired by Jen from the movie. I like life work horror is just like everything, and women directed horror is also. So that's why I'm so excited to chat, because there's just so much cool stuff happening in the space. And
There is.
leading to my next question, so
Yeah.
in your time working in film and like being around horror, how have you seen the genre change in terms of women involvement, both in front of the camera, behind the camera, and how they're tackling subject matter? Because I mean,
Sure.
horror is a pretty male, like we all know, it's pretty male dominated space for such a long time.
Yes.
For a lot of reasons.
Yes. I mean, the first thing I'm seeing is like, women have been represented in horror films since forever. And now we are telling our stories. So that's a really nice shift. But, with the conversations and the way that I think about it like the shift kind of happening in 2014 with the release of The Babadook and Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. And then you start to see, these films coming out that are directed by women in like more and more and more. And in the conversations I'm having with women, we're talking like, well, what happens when women are telling these stories? Like, what is it? And I think that, what comes up a lot is threat, trauma, birth, these things that are intrinsic to our experience in the world, which are often horrifying. Birth can often be, really lovely after it's done because you have a child. But like, these things that are specific to us. And one of the things that I've started to theorize and what's changing is that, this idea of the final girl, right? And like these films directed by men, you saw the trauma, right? And then it ends. And you don't really know what happens to her. You don't like the PTA, like what happens in Texas Chainsaw, right? But like a lot of these films that are coming out now, like you look at Censor, you look at Mayday, you look at Violation, right? It's like the trauma happens, but we're watching the story of what happens after that trauma. We're watching that experience of those things that people live with. And I think that maybe men can't tell those stories as well because those aren't their experiences. And so that's one of the things that I think is most interesting is like the telling of the trauma after the violence. And that might also be violent, but it's what happens after what we would normally see in a horror movie. And I think that that's so interesting. And I also think what's interesting is like, everything's kind of like genre fluid, right? The things that we're watching aren't just like, I talk to a lot of people and they're like, well, I don't think I'm making a horror film because like there's some idea that horror films are still just slashers from the 80s and which are fabulous. But like, that's what's interesting too. A mixture of a little comedy, maybe a musical, maybe just drama, maybe it's just tension, but it has those elements that are intrinsic to horror films that I think are so interesting. So that's my word vomit of all the things that I think about in terms of like women, mainly directors and filmmakers, like making the work now.
Yeah, because I just watched your talk with Madeline Sims Fewer about Violation, and Frida Kemp from Knocking, and from Caryn Corone. God, that's terrible. From Mayday, and like that's such an interesting conversation about how none of them really thought they were making horror movies at first, and how horror as a concept, I think, is changing. And horror now, I feel like, especially, in our current day and age, horror is more than just like monsters and knives. It's about like experience of life, because life is a pretty traumatic thing to, unfortunately, to experience all the time.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting to hear these conversations with like how these filmmakers are tackling and how they don't think it's a horror movie. But then when they come out, it's like, oh, people are like, this is a horrifying concept. And
Yeah.
I love that about the genre and how like elastic it is.
It's so elastic. And I'm always like, I'm listening to my son singing. It's really cute.
Oh,
He's 7.
oh.
Future horror fan.
Hell yeah.
But like to me, because I've been trying to define horror for a long time, I think it's indefinable. Like you can't,
Yes.
you can't be like, it makes you do this, it makes you feel this is what it looks like, which is what makes it obviously so fucking cool because it really can be sort of anything. And so we do start a lot of these conversations, and I'm always very like, okay, so I respect that, and I know that, and I can see that, like, this isn't Halloween, like I get it, but you have these elements in it that are genres, so let's talk about that. And then kind of at the end they're like, oh, this might be a horror film. And and I know like festivals and distributors, they like to name a topic, so it's put it,
Yeah,
if it doesn't fit into one of these things, it can fit into like horror. But that's also what's so cool about it. It could be so many different things.
for sure. And I also think, especially like, Violation is one of my favorite movies of this year slash of all time. I love rape revenge movies. As a survivor myself, I think there's a lot of catharsis to be found personally in rape revenge movies. I know that's not everyone's experience, but like for me, I think
Yeah.
they're incredible ways of experiencing that catharsis, especially directed by someone like, or co-directed by Sims Fewer. And
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, your thoughts about that, if that's something you're in, like, have kind of thought about or interested in, about like the reclamation of exploitation films through a female director's lens, and kind of what that is
Yeah.
looking like, and kind of that exciting development, I think, especially like kind of building up now. And even with censor, what about video nasties? Like, there's just an interesting reclamation of a genre that's known for exploiting women that I
Yeah.
think is really cool.
I think it's really cool too. I went through this period where I don't know why this was my thinking, but I was like, horror movies aren't cathartic. Like,
Oh,
and I don't know,
interesting.
but I don't know, when I think about it now, I think I was just being like a brat about it. Like, and I don't,
Yeah.
because I, like, does art have the power to change things? Well, in theory, yes, it does,
Yeah.
and so, but maybe that's because those stories weren't being told in the right way. Like, in a way that was relatable to me. I mean, there's some like socio-political things that I can relate to, and going crazy and watching film going crazy, it makes me feel better. But I think it
Yeah.
like makes people feel seen and their experience is validated. Um, and I think, you know, I've shifted my position a little bit on,
Mhm.
on like those
Yeah.
things. I don't think it makes us feel any better, say about like Trump or or that, but the fact that it is an outlet to kind of gather in thought and ideas of, we are all collectively going through an experience together. Let's go a little nuts and let's see what could happen. Like
Yeah.
showing us the unknowable, and showing us the knowable can
Yeah.
be a bit help. It can be a bit helpful in like processing daily life. But yeah, I think back now and I was like, I was just being a big contrarian.
Hey, growth. It's personal growth. It's totally fine.
I'm like, why would I say that? I mean, I guess it's because it's like, there's all these ideas about like the death drive and all that sort of, and it's just like, I don't
Yeah.
feel like I'm getting over my own mortality by watching this, but I do feel like the issues in which it speaks about those, getting them out into the world, makes me feel better, talking about
Yeah.
race and gender and trauma and violence. Those things
Yeah.
are very interesting and they do help. And to have those like dialogues out in the world is invaluable.
Well, exactly. I feel like, especially again, with especially like rape revenge movies, that dialogue, especially now in this time of like Me Too and being more aware, and like women feeling hopefully slowly but surely more comfortable in discussing their experiences. It's like these movies are so important in that movement of like confronting trauma and talking about trauma. And you can talk about your trauma, and like you should be allowed to kind of parse through it and not just hide from it. which
Yeah.
I love horror for that too, of just like being able to kind of process your feelings in a safe space.
Yeah. You can also
But
like mutilate your attacker and put them in ice cream.
exactly. You can process it. You can do something really fucked up and like really feel cool about it. Cause like, I mean, like I can't do that in real life or else I will be arrested. But in a movie, it's like good for her. You know what I
Good for, no, it
mean?
is very the sawing. It is.
um, so you obviously watch a lot of horror movies and movies in general, and you've talked to some incredible people. So who are some of your favorite like up and coming horror filmmakers, female horror filmmakers that you've watched films of in the past year or so?
I mean, I have to say Prano Bailey Bond. I have to say Rose Glass. I think Saint Maud is a fucking masterpiece. Like it is
Like
just
how I watch these movies from these like debut filmmakers. I'm like, I don't how like I can't understand your incredible brain and how you made this movie. Like both of them, but Saint Maud blew my mind when I
it,
watched it for the first time.
that and Sound of Metal are my favorite movies of
Sound
the year
of
before it came out,
Metal.
which is also a debut feature, not by a woman, but still a debut feature
But
film. And
still, but an incredible
it's
film about like disability and like
yeah,
working through the world as like a differently able person, and like
yeah.
love that too.
That was the first movie I was like, I wish I saw seen in the theater because I wanted to hear it. You
Yeah.
know, I was like, I really want to hear
Yes.
this movie. Nikki Achujusu has her first feature film coming out next year called Nanny. I don't know if it's being released next year, but I know it'll definitely be in the film festival circuit. What are some
Cool.
other really great films? Oh my God, I saw this film, Medusa. Anita Rocha de Silveira directed it. And she's Brazilian. And we have a talk. We have another of our talks coming out. I just said this tonight on Friday, and
You didn't do
about
the date. I was
religion
going to ask
art.
you about the
Yeah,
date, about all
and
that, but
she's in that, and that is just a beautiful blend of a lot of genres, and but uses horror, and it's just it's great. I don't know what else to say. I want to see everything she does. Kate Dolan's "You Are Not My Mother" is coming out,
yeah.
and I programmed her short film Cat Calls a while ago, and I love that film, and I'm just excited. There's a lot of like great stuff coming out. Like Mariama Diallo's like she's like writing her new film. And it's a fruitful time. It's a fruitful time.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm like
Yeah.
I can't watch all of this because my brain's gonna melt. You know, I gotta like throw in some like James Bond or like kids movies with my kid to kind of like cleanse the palate.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'm excited about all those. I'm also excited about all the short films that are certain to come out next year. Like I just, we just completed our current round of like grant recipients, and there were so many amazing shorts. Like I could have funded 3 or 4 times the amount that I did. And it made me so excited. It made me sad, but it also made
Yeah.
me so excited because I'm like, the problem isn't good content if they don't make it out into the world. The problem is in the system. Oh, I see a cat just came in.
Oh, yeah, my kitten.
Not
She
a
has a lot to
Zoom.
say about horror. It's not a Zoom unless a cat or some kind of pet makes an entrance. Yeah, she just bursted into the scene. Like, excuse me, what's going on in here?
Hello.
Well, that's amazing. And like I need to watch more shorts. Like I'm someone who just needs to watch more shorts because there are so many incredible films that are short films and a lot of amazing filmmakers who get their start there.
Yeah.
But talking about the filmmakers you're thinking about and like filmmakers in Brazil, do you see kind of like an international kind of growth in the women in horror space, or like how do you think it's changed in different parts of the world, if you've kind of seen any kind of difference? Like, and I'm assuming a lot of your
Yeah.
films are from all over the place, right? Like it's not just a United States, based in the United
Yeah.
States or North America.
Yeah. I mean, well, those films I mentioned, so like Kate's in the UK, Jenna Bass did Good Madams in South Africa, Medusa's in South America. So it is kind of like international,
Yeah.
but it's all kind of, what's interesting is that it's all kind of speaking the same language. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
that's like a geeky pun. I didn't mean to make a mom joke, but like it's like they are dealing with the world and I don't know how I'm trying to say this, but like, I've been looking back at kind of horror films like post 9/11, which is a very American experience.
Yeah.
And which I couldn't see a lot of those films for like through that lens at that time. I think that trauma experience was too real. But now what's happening is so global, you know, with the pandemic and the dictators and reproductive rights being challenged and all like right-wing conservatism taking over. I feel as if there is a common denominator with a lot of the women making these films, you know, like our experience of being a woman in the United States is the same as, you know, Anita's being in another country, you know, like being challenged if you are a valuable human being in the world, you know, being assaulted, making sure you're not assaulted, you know, just kind of those challenges. I think they're universal, and that's really, really interesting. And, you know, also, you know, being a mother is such a horror staple that is very universal. So from the conversations, because they've sort of been from different countries, like it is along those lines, you know, all those intersectional things, sexuality, race, gender.
Yeah. Oh, that's so fast. That is so cool. Because I just feel like horror is, people are finally kind of opening up to international horror even more. So it's really cool to hear like the ways that there are a lot of similarities and and like different lenses, but still kind of like you said, the same kind of cinematic language, which I love. So before we wrap up, I just want to, you know, you've mentioned that there's another talk coming out this week, but we'd love to hear about that talk and then any future plans for this discussion series about the future of horror as female.
Sure. So we have one coming out on Friday. It is centered around the release of Mickey Reese's Agnes. And it will include, well, it does include, because we already recorded it, Molly Quinn, who's the producer and is in Agnes. She's Mary in Agnes. Kate Siegel from Midnight Mass, Haunting of Hill House, Bly Manor. She's so great.
That's
and then Anita from Medusa. And so we, excuse me, like unpack this relationship of religion and horror, but specifically through like Christianity and the church, and not like through like, even though in Agnes there is a possession, but like, you know, not through the lens of like the devil and evil, but like where is evil in line with like the church. And it's a super fruitful conversation that actually is less about the filmmaking and more about the concepts. And
that's awesome.
And I thought that was really interesting. I left that conversation very excited and with a lot to think about in terms of women's roles in horror stories, not just like the filmmaking aspect of it, but like in stories. And I'm always interested to talk to people about like religion, because everybody has somewhat of a different kind of background and experience. Or like, I was raised in the Catholic Church and I was Irish Catholic, or I was Mexican Catholic. I'm like, I wasn't raised in the church at all. Like, but everybody still kind of has this common threat.
Yeah. Oh, my religious trauma is very real. As a former Irish Catholic, 100%. That sounds so exciting and like a really cool topic. And especially because women in religion is such a big thing in horror as well. And so Agnes is a fascinating movie about that relationship too. So that's incredible. And then any other plans for next year into 2022?
Excuse me. I'm all of a sudden about to like cough up a lung. We're doing one last screening in 2021. We're showing Nicole Dorsey's debut feature, Black Conflux, which was at TIFF in 2019.
Wait, I saw it's finally screening. I saw it at TIFF and it was one of my favorites, and I've been waiting to hear when it was going to come out, because it like nobody really saw. I feel like not that many people saw it, and it's beautiful film. It's incredible.
It's an amazing film. I loved it too. And there's a lot of films that were like at TIFF in 2019 that just haven't had a life yet.
Yeah.
And it bums me out. But this was one of them. And so I believe it's really going to have like a VOD like release on the 14th. But for anyone in New York, Nighthawk Cinema, come see it.
Go see it.
Beautiful
it's
on the big screen.
Incredible. Again, another kind of inversion of like the idea of certain kinds of horror tropes. It's not a horror movie, but it's got like that air around it.
Exactly. And then in February, we're doing a screening of Aaron Vassopoulos' film Superior, which was at Sundance this year. It was in their midnight section. It's also very horror adjacent.
Yes.
But it's really brilliant, and I'm excited about that. And then we will most definitely be doing more talks. I think we're going to do one centered around You Are Not My Mother with Magnolia again. The aim is to always do at least 3 a year, but
Cool.
they seem to be more than that. And I'll just also plug, we have our annual Kickstarter going on right now, where people can help our exhibition programming for 2022, and that includes our horror conversations.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and everyone today about the future of film is female and the future of horror is female. And everyone, make sure to support them and keep watching films directed by, written by, created by women.
Thank you so much.